Reality isn't as stable as we think. Let's dive into some truly mind-bending glitches. Story 1. There he is. Again. Every time I drive through Ravenna, Ohio, in which is very often, there he is, again. This guy who is not homeless but probably lives in some type of government housing near downtown Ravenna, crosses my path every time I drive through. Not just see him walking down the road. Like literally crosses the road right in front of my car even if we're not at a crosswalk or stoplight or somewhere where you're supposed to cross. It doesn't just happen on the main road either, it happens on side roads. You could maybe think that he had memorized my car, but he also does it when I drive the truck, too. The truck has tinted windows and there's no sticker or anything to make it stand out from the crowd. Even when I do drive through Ravenna in my car and see him with enough notice to make maybe eye contact and him acknowledge that I'm looking at him, he doesn't show any facial indications that lets me know that he recognizes me. I used to work at a Circle K and him be a customer on just a few occasions. I'd make conversation with him just like I would anybody else, but it was kind of difficult because honestly he is not all there. Or is he? He's known for his rants that sound crazy. Sometimes he speaks of religion. He approaches people at pumps while they're pumping their fuel rambling off crazy talk and sometimes complete nonsense. Customers come in and they mention it and usually everybody laughs because we all know him and it's like whatever. I actually enjoyed hearing some of the things he was saying because I kind of thought a few things he said were interesting. I liked the guy so much that I gave him a nickname, Doubloon. Because one time he came into Circle K and told me he had a doubloon and it was worth a lot of money. And I totally entertained it. Another time he came in telling us he was going to sue Longhorn Tobacco Company because he came up with the word Longhorn and that they stole it. But back to the point. Sometimes I feel like he came out of nowhere. Like I am pretty observant of my surroundings and you think I would see him walking, but I don't. All of a sudden he'll just walk out in front of my vehicle. I mean, he did it the other day when I came out of the bank, in which is just a simple come out of the drive-through turning left and then there's a light right there where I'm now stopped, and then all of a sudden before that light can change there he is. Stepping out in front of my car, truck. I've even feared a few times that one day I might hit him. On another note, he's not the only person in the town of Ravenna that I'm suspicious is also like an NPC in my simulation. The guy who runs the laundromat, I see only a giant eagle and always in the same area right in front of the registers. 80% of the time I go grocery shopping there, I run into him. I see the repeating pattern and it's really hard to ignore. I've never been to any other laundromat in the area and I don't usually go to laundromats. I question whether or not if I never went there if I would be running into him, a giant eagle. I know that my life has been paranormal episode after episode after episode and I should be used to weird things happening, but this kind of paranormal thing is actually bothering me. Ever since I got past life regression therapy done on me around 12 years old, my life has never been the same. So my question for all of you, if by chance this was a simulation that I was living in and there was a pattern of people crossing my path and showing up specific places, is this because I'm on my spiritual path? Or does this mean that I'm stuck in repeat and I need to do something to change my path? And then if I do change my routine, or let's say do some things that I have been maybe putting off or not putting enough effort into in regards to, let's say, my business, will I then know that I'm then on my right path because I won't be seeing them anymore? Would they stop crossing my path? I'm starting to feel like Jim Carrey in the movie The Truman Show. I'm not schizophrenic, but I am a little bipolar. And if I don't understand something, it kind of pisses me off. Lol. So even if you don't have an answer for me, feel free to let me know if you have anything like this happening to you in the comments below. 2. Glitch, parallel universe, divine intervention. Let me know what you think. Glitch, parallel universe, divine intervention? About 2 years ago, me and two of my friends, Mary and Laura, were going on a trip for my Mary's 21st birthday. Mary always had the idea that she wouldn't live to make it to 21 and is extremely Catholic. We left for our trip mid-afternoon on a Friday, so the roads were busy. At every single stop we made, Mary prayed with her rosary in her hands and sprinkled holy water on all of us and around the car. Mary was already tense driving as the roads were busy and could hardly ever switch lanes due to all the cars zooming by. We are cut off by a car going at least 85 miles per hour. Moments before this, I and Laura are looking behind us to make sure Mary can switch lanes and tell her it's no good, there's too many cars coming. Mary loses control of the car and we spin repeatedly until we crash into the guardrail. When we get out of the car, there's no cars on the interstate. This is 5 p.m. on a Friday. We had just saw the cars 2 minutes beforehand. To this day, none of us know what happened, but we all had a very uneasy feeling that something just wasn't right. While I'm grateful we weren't hit while riding in Mary's Mini Cooper, my friends and I to this day cannot explain what happened. Mary was convinced we died and went to an alternative timeline as she was certain she was going to die before she turned 21. I honestly don't know what happened. Thoughts? Names were changed for privacy. 3. Strange fog. I want to start out by saying that this is one of the weirder things that have happened to me. And some of the details might make me sound not credible, but I assure you that this was all very real to me. And I'll never forget it. I'm going to start towards the end so that you can better understand the dream part of the story. But the actual fog part of the story isn't until the end. I was in my later 20s, so let's ballpark it and say about 10 to 15 years ago. My mom had been calling me a little bit more than usual, nagging me, telling me I needed to get this and this done, and it was becoming frustrating because I didn't have a car and I was on somebody else's time. So I was left with pretty much my hands in the air like, what do you want me to do? I'm stuck. Still, she continued on until I eventually one day on the phone with her. I finally got sick of hearing it and began to tell her what her problem was. I said, since when do you care so much about me? All you did when I was younger was try to pawn me off. She asked me what I meant by that, and I explained to her that since the day I was labeled bipolar, all she did was try to find places she could stick me to pass time until my sister was out of the house, because between her and I, she definitely had her hands full because we were not really listening. Not one bit. And she just couldn't handle us both, I guess. So instead of disciplining my older sister, and seeing that I was about to go down the same path following in her footsteps, she was probably just trying to avert that situation. I told her that I thought it was really messed up that she put me in 3 mental hospitals along with a livable jail, all because I wasn't taking the prescriptions prescribed to me on a regulated, consistent basis. So she figured by sticking me in these places it would help regulate me on my pills? I didn't take them consistently because I wasn't home consistently. I was out having fun. But when I mentioned that she put me in 3, she stopped me and said, "No, wait, you weren't in 3 mental hospitals." And I said, "What do you mean?" "Yes, I was." And then she told me to name them. The first 2 she agreed with as I named them off, but when I got to the 3rd one and said Edwin Shaw, she said, "What are you talking about? You've never been to Edwin Shaw." In a confused, stern tone I said, "Yes, I have." And she asked, "When? Can you describe it?" But when I tried to remember what the place looked like and the details of my stay, I was stopped in my tracks. I could not remember one thing about the place, but for some reason thought that I had been lived there. Rewinding back to a year prior to this, I had a dream that my husband and I were in a great hurry to get my toddler, at the time, and bags packed, out of the home and into the car as quickly as possible. We were fearful and needed to get out immediately. But as soon as we exited the home and got down the porch steps, a big blue boat car, sorry I don't know what kind of car it was, but that's like a term we use around here to describe these kind of vehicles, pulled up and 2 big guys got out. They began to approach us but then stop and stood waiting as I sighed, realizing that I had to go with them. I hugged and kissed my family, and then they guided me to the vehicle, placing me in the backseat. That's when we began our long car ride, probably at least an hour or so, to our destination, in which was a mystery to me. I remember driving down a stretch of road with just trees lining each side for miles and miles. Reminds me now of a scene in the show The Sopranos. When we finally did arrive, we pulled into a long drive with a gate that was open, and after approaching the big brick building, I was let out of the car and directed to the front yard area, in which could have been classified as maybe a courtyard. I noticed that there were a lot of people wandering around in hospital gowns, and then one by one they all started approaching me. They circled me and then started to touch me. Maybe they were welcoming me, but after being surrounded and them all touching me, they were starting to scratch me, probably unintentionally, and it began to hurt. I don't think that they knew that they were hurting me, but still I was in a panic. That's when I looked over at the front steps of the building where an assuming head nurse was standing, and I looked at her with the look of, "I need help." I saw her facial expression turn to negative. She looked pretty irritated. But I saw her take action by ringing a bell, causing everyone to immediately head towards the door. I was relieved but also pretty upset and confused. When I entered the building, right around the corner there was a decent-sized office lounge area where I was led to stand and wait. But just like before, one by one, maybe not as many, mentally handicapped people surrounded me and once again were trying to touch me, but of course instead, scratching me again. At this point I am getting pretty pissed. But I think that anybody would have been lost all patience at that point. I look over towards the bottom of some steps that lead upstairs, and once again there's that same head nurse, but only she's talking to somebody this time. So, to get her attention, I shouted, "Hey, can you do something?" I'm not like these people. That's when she put her nose up in the air and led me up the steps kind of all huffy-puffy. When we got to the top there was a few hallways that stemmed off, but she led me diagonally right into the first room. There were 4 cots on the left and 5 on the right. She directed me to the very last one all the way around it closest to the corner in the wall. I sat on the bed and I looked down to see that a few of the bags that we had previously packed were waiting there for me. I thought, oh good, and I picked them up to see what kind of contents might be in them, but as I started opening the first bag the head nurse who stood in front of me now said, "The doctor will be in a minute to burn you with a light bulb." I looked up at her with squinted eyes and confusion, and again she pointed her nose up in the air once with a quick sassy, I then listened and noted the sound of her high heels clicking as I watched her walk out of the room. Her attitude seemed like she felt some sense of satisfaction knowing what was about to happen to me. That's when I began to panic. I look up and in a thin window with no glass or screen, sat my cat Buddy. Remember, this is a dream, so don't think, well, this is becoming far-fetched, and give up on me just yet, okay? Buddy looked at me and then looked out the window and then looked back at me, insinuating that we got to go. And this is the way out. So I start ripping open the tied plastic grocery bag with the clothing inside of it, and I find my daughter's sleepers instead of my own clothes, possessions. So I started taking 2 of the sleepers and attempting to tie them together to hopefully fashion some sort of rope, but all of a sudden the doctor walks in. Since when is the doctor really in? In a minute. He stands in front of me where the nurse had stood prior, and I slowly lowered the bag to set it back down on the floor. That's when I noticed what was in his hands. I would describe it as a light bulb on a stick. Not a regular light bulb, but an old-styled tube one of sorts, and the stick was a thick, long tube, electronical device. I put my hands up, stood up, and said, "No, wait. You don't have to do this." And I positioned myself so that when I was backing up that I would back all the way up to position myself up against the wall next to the window where the cat sat on the sill. I looked at the cat and he looked at me, and then he weighed things out like he was really about to jump. But then he stopped. That's when he looked back at me with a look like, "We're not going to make it." And I looked back at the doctor who was stepping towards me, and he took that device in which I would compare to as a cattle prod, and he hit me in the chest with it. He was electrocuting me with this device. Then he would pull it back, and then he hit me in my other side around my stomach area, pressing hard. Then, he pulled it off of me again and hit me in the other side of my chest. That's when I visually saw myself leaving my body through the top of my head. And then I followed the cat out the window. When the cat jumped from the window sill out towards the ground, I watched him jump at an angle into the field. But when I went out the window, I floated straight down. The cat had some distance on me, but I did my best to follow him into an open area, clearing along the tree line behind the building. By the time I got to the path, he had already cut off into a little area, but luckily I saw him in time and was able to catch up pretty quick. I watched as he jumped into a hole of what looked to be a large metal structure that was kind of leaning almost on its side. It looked sunbeaten, meaning light faded blue and yellow in color. I thought, I'm never going to fit through that hole. But then I looked back at the big reddish brick building and thought, freak that. And that's when I started tearing off these metal kind of sheets around the hole to make it bigger. I climbed through the hole and came out in my daughter's playhouse in our front yard, but only instead of the cat being there, it was my child with me. Now anybody could pass this off as just a really scary lucid dream with maybe metaphors or some meaning behind it. But it felt so real. Even my chest and spots that he hid with that strange device physically hurt when I had awoken that morning. Fast forwarding back to my mom on the phone and the confusion with Edwin Shaw. She suggested that I look it up because she insisted that it's been closed for years. I of course didn't believe her and jumped on the computer immediately to investigate. From what I gathered, it was no longer being used to help adolescents with mental health struggles during the window when my mom was sending me to these types of places. It seems that they were more concentrated on rehabilitation when it came to brain injuries and multiple other things. But how could this be? I mean, I had been confiding in my friends for all these years, telling them that I've been wrongfully placed in specifically 3 mental hospitals while trying to cope with the trauma. Why would I think I've been in a hospital that I have never been to? The reality of the situation is that I realized that I hadn't even ever heard of the place before. To be more descriptive, I had never researched, been told stories, seen pictures, learn about it in school, or anything. I believe during the time window they could have still been associated with outpatient, but inpatient was no longer a thing. I know this because they eventually affiliated themselves with Akron Children's Hospital, and that was one of the places that I was placed in relation to the other 2. So there I sat with false memories and pretty much just shell-shocked. I hung up with my mom pretty quickly and continued to read everything that I could find on the subject, leading me to a website that had pictures of the back tree line. Although I just looked and tried to find the picture to post along with this, I could not. I do remember it being associated with some type of paranormal exploration, ghost hunting group, and posted in the comments of someone highlighting the place on their website. I read about their not only walk-around investigation inside of the building, but also they spoke about exploring the outside around the building as well. Eventually I came across a picture where they spoke about a weird fog or mist that they saw only in one spot of the wood line and how they couldn't explain it, but it was definitely noticeable and out of place. They expressed that they didn't understand why there would be a fog just in that one area. And they were confused. That's when I noticed the old overturned truck right next to it that looked as if it was abandoned long ago, leaving it looking rusty and surprisingly sunbeaten. I saw this truck, it felt like 1,000 emotions flood my entire body. And I began to cry. But I guess crying is an understatement. I would more describe it as bawled my eyes out. It felt like I was grieving. I am 100% positive that that metal structure that I tore through was that truck from my dream. There's no doubt in my mind. I would put money on it. Now after saying all that, I want to assure everybody that I am not a crazy person. Although I do tell people when I meet them that they can call me Crazy Amy because I'm a paranormal investigator. Lol. I was later in life reassessed and the label of bipolar was retracted. Although I don't think that is 100% accurate, and I believe that they just didn't want to issue me SSI checks anymore after I turned 18. I have since raised my daughter, who is now a teenager. I have a surprise now 2 years old as well, along with a job and a small business with a storefront. I have 1,000 friends, and for a while there I also had a paranormal club with 550 people in it, who I would take out on free adventures. I'm extremely overly nice and caring, even to the point where I've read over 2,000 people's tarot cards for free. So I'm not some nut job, more so lately just another ordinary face in the crowd, married, living a completely normal life. My only need is blood pressure medication. Since then my mom has passed away, and I do feel bad for all the times I did lose my temper enough to tell her what her problem was and for blaming her for not being able to juggle 3 kids. Having to juggle 2 now myself. I can relate and understand how difficult that must have been for her. But I thought it would be cool to share one of my more frightening personal experiences. And before I jump off here, I wanted to tell you what my final hypothesis is of why I was even out there. When I think back to the dream setting of Edwin Shaw, it looked like what it would have looked like back in the day before my time. It looked as if it was around the era where they had started housing tuberculosis patients. It has come to my understanding that hospitals took in tuberculosis patients because they were offered extra funding. Some places promoted themselves to house people with tuberculosis, acting as if they could help them with some experimental devices, miracle cure. I'm sure that everybody's heard about all the horror stories of all these experimental devices that were created that were not helpful but ended up more likely torture devices. I could picture the scenario of them using a device on a person and then that person expiring because of it. And the doctors notifying the families afterwards, telling them that they've been through enough and that their facility for a small fee would take care of all of the funeral stuff. You just take the time that you need now to grieve, don't worry, we'll handle the rest. Like now you can all just move on with your lives. Before Edwin Shaw was torn down, people had reported and even documented using video and photos the tunnel in the basement where they would take the expired people out through instead of the front door and directly to the cemetery located on the property. So I guess the big question would be, could I be buried in that cemetery right now? Some people might suggest that I go there, and believe me, after 10 years I have repetitively asked myself why I have not. I guess I kind of fear that if I go there and I do find me, that it could alter something in my present reality. Will I still be kinda psychic? Will it change my whole timeline? Will I get home and only have 1 kid instead of 2? Could it throw off everything and even change even more of my memories? Or could it possibly set off a chain of events that could cause the current me to expire? There's just too many questions for me to jump up and want to risk it. I don't feel like dodging things for the rest of my life, like in reference to something like the movie Final Destination. But here I sit at almost 40, still thinking about it. And it still really bothers me. Story 4. Lost keys. About 2 years ago I slept over at my best friend's new house. FYI, I've been sober for 18 years. The following morning, I couldn't find my car keys. Now, I've been known to list things as I tend to leave a trail of belongings. So we searched all my bags. Nothing. Then, we spent the next 2 hours, teen and husband, searching for the keys. Nothing. We decided to let the team try and hotwire my precious Jeep, but we couldn't get in. My husband, in a different state, used the Jeep app to unlock it. We couldn't get the Jeep app to start at BC. The key fob was not in range. Just as my friend's son walks over to the Jeep with his giant toolbox, he came from behind. The moment I looked up, I saw the keys lying in the middle of the driveway, which all four of us scoured, about 5 feet from car. Still SMH. You'll see from the pic that the driveway is not that long. Story 5. Lollipop stick. Hello. So a few weeks ago I grabbed a Dum Dum Pop from the candy bowl when one checked into an appointment, put the wrapper in my pocket and the lollipop in my mouth. It was lemon lime flavor, and I promptly threw it away when I got into my doctor's office because it was gross. About 2 days later I went to dinner with my family and reached in my hoodie pocket and found the wrapper, wrapped around a lollipop stick which was torn at the point where the actual lollipop would have been, and partially shredded. I know for a fact I never put the stick in my pocket as I threw the whole thing away. Aside from that, it wasn't sticky at all. I still think about it almost every day. Story 6. Girl respawns on the bus. So a while ago I was riding on a city bus. I was sitting in the middle, facing the backside. A girl with headphones in her 20s appears from behind me and places herself in the standing area just in front of me. She doesn't sit anywhere, which is weird cause the bus was almost empty and she was loaded with shopping bags and a backpack. She spent there around 15 minutes, while talking constantly on her phone. Then I clearly see her heading to the back door, getting off the bus and walking away. I think to myself, finally some quiet. So, another 10 minutes and a couple of bus stops pass by and suddenly bam. Like a deja vu, the same girl with the bags and the headphones appears from behind me again and takes the same spot she was standing the previous 15 minutes while still talking on the phone and continue the ride. It was just like when you die in a video game, it respawns you back to the last checkpoint. Anyway, my stop came shortly after that, so I didn't have the time to reflect on the situation more thoroughly. No idea how or why she made that stunt. Story 7. Glitch or paranormal. A few nights ago I was woken up by a very strange, distressed meow. It's not abnormal as my cat sleeps with me and hasn't been feeling well, but this meow was different. I immediately popped up because it sounded as though she was about to throw up, so I shoved her butt a bit to get her off of the bed. She ended up running to the end of the bed where it sounded like she actually threw up. I was attempting to get out of bed when I heard my other cat start to meow, and I found her standing at my closed bedroom door, wanting to get out. As I opened the door, my cat took a few steps back as though she was surprised and confused because on the other side of the closed door was the cat that was just throwing up. I was so confused but decided I was just really tired and went to go clean up the throw up. But there was no throw up. Both my husband and myself saw the cat and heard the cat throw up. What did we experience? Story 8. Experienced 2 glitches years apart but realized they shared something obscure in common. I wrote a comment in this sub yesterday relating to a time loop glitch I experienced about 8 years ago. I also made a post like 3 years ago about another glitch I experienced, and realized they shared something really weird in common. I'll try to keep this as short as possible, but apologies if it's long. When I was around 15 to 16 years old, my friends and I had this place that we nicknamed The Spot. It was a huge sand dune on the inlet that overlooked the skyline of our beach town and ocean. It had an incredible view. The closest beach access parking was over an hour's walk away. Also, it's illegal to be on the sand dunes due to conservation movements in the state. We were dumb teenagers and have since learned from our actions. We knew to respect the land enough to not litter or kick sand or anything. Just sit and appreciate lol. One night my best friend and I were making our trek to the spot, smoking along the way. At one point in the walk I looked over to my right to the inland side and took notice of 3 condos standing solo in the landscape. No other developments, quite a rare sight to see in Florida, especially our touristy town. I looked the other way to the ocean side and saw a heron wading in the water on one leg, an airplane gliding in the distance behind him. I took a deep breath of the salty air and took notice of how beautiful it is to live here. Well, a few minutes go by, 5, maybe 10 maximum, and I notice we are approaching 3 condos again. I look over to the water and see a heron on one leg and a plane passing behind. Okay. Weird. Few more minutes pass by, and then again. Same 3 condos, same heron, same plane. I thought I was going crazy, until my best friend broke the silence and says, "Dude, I swear we've passed by that bird 3 times now." We are freaking out a bit. She jokes we are in a time loop. It becomes less funny as we see it again, 2 more times. We don't know what to make of it, so we just keep walking. Some more minutes go by, and we stop. We turn around to look back, and we see the lights of the 3 condos, way off into the distance like 2 miles at least. We just laughed at ourselves but still unsettled. We made it to the spot and we smoke our weed and end the night on a good note at least. Now get this, fast forward about 5 or so years later. And I experience another glitch. A new restaurant had opened up. It was located right behind the restaurant I was working at the time. We shared a little outside backyard and we'd take breaks together. I also ate there with my neighbors. It's located on a cute little downtown street called Canal Street where there's a bunch of shops and restaurants. That morning was a gloomy morning, street was deserted. I'm driving down the street with my BF and I get to the end of the street, look to my left, and see the restaurant. I got very confused because it's supposed to be at the front of the street and to the right of me, so I ask my BF why they have 2 locations on the same street. He doesn't understand what I'm talking about, acts as if it's always been there. I was stopped in the street looking at it, confused, for like at least 30 seconds. I loop through and go back to the front of the street and find the location I remember, exactly where it should be. I point it out to my BF and he has no idea what I'm talking about, just completely forgot the conversation we just had in front of the other location. So I drive down to the end of the street to show him, and it's gone. Totally vanished, replaced by the same empty buildings for lease that I knew to always be there. I drove around the street a couple more times to confirm what I saw, but everything was back to normal. The kicker. That restaurant is named The Spot. Literally, look up The Spot in New Smyrna Beach, Florida and you'll find it. I just think it's so crazy that 2 very concerning slips of reality that I ever experienced both involved places called The Spot. Story 9. Still confused. On my daughter's birthday, I had to run an errand to pick up a balloon inflator that a friend had kindly offered us. My wife and I had talked about it in the morning, but we didn't agree on a time, and she never gave me the friend's address, so I completely forgot about it. Later that day, I wanted to get some pots for planting to have my plants ready for the party. I searched Facebook Marketplace and found someone giving away 10 nice pots. We agreed on a price, and I went to pick them up. I had the seller's address on my phone and entered the house number into my car's navigation. For some reason, I was convinced the house number was 22. I knocked on the door, and to my surprise, my friend opened it. She looked confused since we hadn't arranged a time for me to pick up the balloon inflator, and I was equally confused as to why she was answering the door. She was in the middle of a video call and told me to wait a minute. Still puzzled, I quickly asked, "Are you living with Lucy?" Lucy being the person selling the pots. She frowned and said, "Lucy? No, wait a minute." I went back to my car to check my phone and realized the actual address was number 26, not 22. My friend then came out with the balloon inflator and said, "I didn't know you were coming to pick this up. Hope it's useful. Say hi to your wife and enjoy the party." I asked again, "Do you know Lucy?" She laughed and said, "Oh, Lucy is my neighbor." At that point, I had to explain. "Look, I actually came to pick up some plant pots, not the inflator. I wasn't planning on getting it today, and I didn't even know your address." She looked confused. I was confused. Then I knocked on Lucy's door, explained everything, and, honestly, nobody really understood what had just happened. The city is huge, with at least 100,000 houses. Google Maps had no idea about the party, the pots, or the balloons. And to be honest, I'm still confused. Story 10. My boyfriend's new motorcycle. When I was 20, I was dating a guy and he bought a little motorcycle to kick around the city. He lived in a 4-family building with garages underneath. One morning after I had spent the night, I had to get up at 4 a.m. to go to work. As I'm gathering my stuff, I hear his motorcycle start, so I look out the window and I see someone pulling out of the driveway on his motorcycle. I tried to wake him up, to go check immediately, but he wouldn't get up. I can't remember why. This was 20 years ago, lol. It just so happened that my coworker's best friend lived directly below him and she came in that day. I told her that I was worried about him and told her about his motorcycle. She said she heard it too and saw him right away, so we both saw this happen. This was before you needed a cell phone, so all morning I was calling his place and he wasn't answering. He called me from his work not knowing I was trying to reach him, and I asked him if he checked on his motorcycle and called the cops. He didn't remember me trying to wake him up and he told me he rode the motorcycle to work. No one had touched it, yet 2 of us saw someone ride away on it. It was exactly where he left it and how he left it. What the heck did we see? Story 11. My cake day glitch. So it being my cake day, I'll add my glitch to the weirdness. All my lights are on Alexa. I always turn them on and off. Well, I guess she does, by telling her. I never use the manual switch. Today I was trying to get her to turn it on. She kept telling me it was on. I thought the bulb maybe burned out cause it was flickering the other day. But no light was lighting. I changed the bulb, I turned off and on the smart plug. Tried turning on and off the surge strip. Nothing, so I decided to fiddle with the manual on-off button. It was turned off manually, expressionless. I never turn my lights off that way. Face with raised eyebrow, never. Thinking face. I even looked at my voice activity and it showed where I used my nighttime routine to turn off my appliance that night. Story 12. Cat teleporting. So I have a door that goes to the basement but also goes to the upstairs apartment where my mom lives. I live in the downstairs apartment with my cat. I went upstairs making sure the door was closed to get something from my mom. As I'm chatting with my mom, we can hear my cat at the door. My mom opens the door to her apartment and there she is, my cat. I thought maybe I didn't close the door to my apartment very well, but when I was carrying her downstairs to go back, the door was closed. I have no logical explanation to this. My cat had to have teleported through the door. WTF? Story 13. Time not changing. Hey everyone, I wanted to ask you guys something. Have any of you experienced a glitch where time didn't proceed? For example, it happened today again where I went away at 9:46 to go walk my dog and I came back and I looked again and it said 9:46. And I know damn sure it didn't take 0 seconds to walk my dog. And this is not the first time. I remember a few years ago the same happened at night. And also before that. So, anyone else? Story 14. Building assembled in mere hours. Days ago my mom and I were driving to get some groceries. This was around 11 a.m., no later than 11:30. We passed by a gas station that had been flattened for months and under construction for a little while. The entire property looked like a hurricane hit it in October, as confirmed by Google Earth even now, and construction was at a standstill for months. On this day, when we passed around 11 a.m., I made the comment to my mom that it's crazy how they've been working on the station for months but it's still just nothing. I made it a point to note to her that there was a single man there surveying but nothing constructed as of yet. Fast forward, it's now 3:03 p.m. the same day. We're driving the same route back past this gas station to go to my sister's house 45 minutes away. There is now a completely assembled car wash frame standing, complete with freshly wet cement still visible. I knew that building was absolutely not there 3 hours ago and became alarmed immediately. I began shouting at my mom that that building was not there hours ago and she told me to shut up, that she sees it too and she knows. In a manner that wasn't angry. Almost a calming yet scared response, trying to reassure me that something isn't right. Anyone who knows me knows that my mom and I do not agree on anything, ever. My curiosity got the best of me and I used DeepSeek to estimate how long it would take an average construction crew to assemble an average gas station car wash frame. 1,000 minus 1,500 square feet. My house is approximately 1,000 square feet and this is definitely bigger than my house. Just cement and cinder blocks. This car wash specifically was assembled with cinder blocks, cement and I'm guessing rebar as well, maybe not. 80 hours with a 6-person crew. Scaled to 25 workers. 24 hours estimated. I then asked if it was even possible to assemble in 3 hours. Yes, but we'd have to have perfect conditions, have 100% human efficiency, ignore safety, ignore any and all curing time, ignore the laws of physics, ignore building code, etc. Theoretically possible, not practically possible, and definitely not something that a business would do. Had this car wash been there in the morning, the man who was surveying the site would have been obstructed from my view when I made the comment about there being no progress on the site, but I had no problem seeing him from at least 100 feet away. The nail in the coffin? As I said earlier, this gas station has been closed for months. It was a pile of rubble when Google Earth came to town in October. In the most recent Google review, 2 months ago, for the gas station, the reviewer said that they had a good experience since the gas station reopened after being closed for a while. That gas station was not open 2 months ago, it wasn't even open 4 months ago. But supposedly he went there after it was closed for a while? I have lived in the same town my entire life and this gas station has only been under construction as of recently. It's not possible that the reviewer was referring to it being closed for construction previously because it had not been closed other than outside normal business hours at all in recent history. I can remember being in middle school 15 years ago and it always looking the same. Story 15. Little differences. Over the last few days, I've been experiencing little mishaps. Certain things not being where I placed them before, cars turning in spots they shouldn't be able to turn. Today I noticed one and just made me really think I've been jumping a lot recently. A few days ago I had my hair in a pony. I felt it slipping, I didn't care. Eventually the pony fell out of my hair and I haven't seen it since, didn't really look for it either, considering it was on the verge of breaking. Today I'm getting back from Walmart after just buying more ponies because I've been using hair clips since I lost my last one. Once I get home, I took my sweatshirt off and on my wrist was my almost broken pony. It's been making me think ever since where do I really belong, and why so many different occurrences lately. Story 16. Car changed colors. I had a friend buy an automatic Toyota Corolla. When he first bought it I remembered it being blue. Every time I seen it I remembered it being blue. About a year went by and he wanted to buy a manual car and was selling his Corolla. I went to purchase said car and it was jet black with no shiny gloss to it. I asked him if he got a paint job and said wasn't it blue. He looked confused and said no, it's always been black. I asked him if he had a blue one before. He said no. I thought I was tripping so I bought it and left. Couple weeks later I met with our mutual friend and said I bought our buddy's car and he looked at it perplexed and said, "Wasn't it blue?" I immediately said that's what I thought. WTF. We checked the registration and insurance and it was listed as black. Man shrugging. Story 17. Seeds multiplying in my water. I drink lemon water every morning. When I make it myself I remove all the lemon seeds before drinking. Today my boyfriend made it for me. I never looked in the cup but after a couple sips I sucked a seed up through my straw and into my mouth and realized, oh, he didn't take the seeds out how I do. No biggie, I put it into a napkin and checked the cup to see if there were any more seeds in there. There were 3 left. After a few more sips, I got another one in my mouth. Same drill, put it into a napkin. My boyfriend asks what I'm doing. I say, just got a seed that I'm putting in here. He says, oh, yeah there were like 3 in there, and explains he didn't know I usually take them out. All good. In my head, I think, close, there were 4. He leaves the room. I then looked in the cup to see where the remaining 2 seeds were so I could put my straw on the other side of the cup. Still 2 in there, just as there should be. I sip it for a few minutes. My boyfriend comes back into the room and talks with me for a bit so I set the cup down. When I pick it back up, I look inside it again because I want to put the straw where the seeds are not, and there are now 7 large lemon seeds in the cup. How? This water was very clear in color so it's not like I was only able to see them once the water level was low. I could see through the water to the bottom of the cup the entire time. This was a light-colored mug as well. The seeds stood out well against the color of it, they could not have blended in. This is such a minor thing that I feel silly being so stuck on it but I cannot move past how much it bothers me. I distinctly counted the number of seeds there were and my boyfriend even accidentally confirmed to me there was a very low number of seeds in there. How is this possible that the 4 original seeds turned into 9 total seeds by the end? I looked at all the seeds when I was done with my water. None of them broke in half making them appear as additional seeds. Story 18. I'm lost my grip on this plane of existence. I was driving home from work today and saw this shape of a person. It was at the corner of this intersection, dressed normally for the weather. It was not walking, but was shifting about a foot to either side of where you could see its body. It vibrated in such a way that startled me for a second. I then focused more closely at it, and could not discern any facial features at all. It was like looking at static on a television screen. I thought at first it must have a mask on of some sort. The car in front of me must have seen the same thing I was, as they slammed on their brakes, with me narrowly avoiding them. There we both sat, feet from whatever this was and it just stood vibrating, with whatever it was for a face looking right at us. I could not tell you how long we sat there, but suddenly realized it had gone, disappeared. I looked to the car that I nearly hit and they were staring blankly back at me. Suddenly a car honked from behind me and we drove away. Story 19. Door changed colors. My fiancé and I live about an hour away from each other. I spend every Wednesday night and nearly every weekend with her at her apartment. Every time I have gone, since we started dating, I remember her front door being white. Saturday night we didn't want to go out so we decided to order food through DoorDash. When the food arrived, the dasher sent a picture and both of us said, "That's not the right place, the door doesn't look like that." She agreed that the door was white. We were even getting ready to report a missing odor, but I walked outside to make sure it wasn't at a neighbor's door, and it was sitting in front of our black door. We were both so weirded out and don't know how to explain it. Story 20. Had my most recent glitch in the Matrix yesterday. For preface, I live in a very small living space, so losing things is next to impossible. Many months ago I put on makeup, as I wear it rarely. I put it away but left out my lipstick, and my mother put it on the kitchen counter. I clearly remember moving it to my bag in the bathroom. What happened last night was that same lipstick appeared in the exact same spot. We have candles there and it was in front of them. To top it off, the lighter for the candles is completely missing, but I found a lighter I never knew I had close by. I expect these time and space glitches to get more frequent over time. Story 21. Laundry appeared and then disappeared. I'm super freaked out right now. Earlier today, before my shower, I tossed the first half of my laundry into the washer and started the load. After I got out, I added the second half, including the clothes I had just taken off, and started a new load. I always triple check that the hamper under my laundry chute is empty before running the washer, and it was empty when I started the second load. Later, when I went to grab everything, the clothes I had been wearing before my shower were somehow back in the laundry basket under my laundry chute. I even told my sister about it while we were on the phone because it was so bizarre. It was really unsettling, so I double-checked the basket just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. They were definitely the clothes I was wearing before my shower. I ended up just dismissing it and went about my day. I just remembered what happened earlier and went downstairs to look at the basket again. Guess what? The clothes are gone. I came back upstairs, and they are sitting in my other basket, clean and ready to be folded. I even smelled them and they were definitely washed. Have I been phasing in and out of other realities all day? Story 22. Grocery store glitch. So this happened about 10 years ago, but I still remember the memory vividly. I was checking out at Publix, loading the groceries on the conveyor belt. There was a person in front of me, so it wasn't moving. Then, at the start of the belt, it shifted 6 inches to the left and then shrunk back. It's like it expanded and then went back to its normal size. My dad was with me and he also saw it. It was so bizarre we didn't know what to say, so I asked the cashier, "Do these belts move?" Which I'm sure sounded very dumb to her because she said, "Yes," not understanding what I was asking about. To this day, I believe it was some weird glitch that I clearly saw, no matter how difficult it is to describe. Story 23. Prices in the shop I work at switched places. First of all, English is not my first language, but I'll try explaining it how I can. The shop I work at has the same prices since it opened. Basically, pizza is €1, hot dog is €1.50, etc. I always worked here alone since it opened. I was the one printing the prices, so no one else did it and no one could change anything, not even my boss. There was a manager for a few weeks, but everything remained the same. Until today. Since forever, hot dog was €1.50 and sandwich with ham was €1.30. The prices are written close to each other. He told me he wants an hot dog, and when I said, "Okay, that will be €1.50. Thank you," he frowned and told me, "The price here clearly says €1.30. I looked at the price confused, and when I read €1.30 next to hot dog, my head literally started spinning because I wrote €1.50 THERE. And until today everyone paid €1.50 for hot dogs. TF happened? Story 24. Distant neighbor showed up to do a job he didn't even know needed done. About 10 years ago, while I was still living with my parents, they were in the process of having a new home constructed. We were living in a mobile home prior to this, on a bit of land our neighbor, not the same one, owned that used to have a mobile home parked there. So there was already electric, water and sewer connections. Now when building a new home, there's all kinds of permits and inspections that need done. One of them was the old septic system, and it was apparent it wasn't up to modern standards and needed replaced. My dad ordered a new septic tank, and would be calling said distant neighbor in a couple days to have the hole dug as he owned a bunch of construction equipment. I'll call him George. The next day, my dad drives out to the job site and starts doing some work. He did a lot himself but had some things done by contractors. Next thing he knows, here comes George up the driveway in a backhoe. My dad's jaw drops. To this very day, he can't figure out how in the hell he knew this. He didn't mention the septic tank to anyone who knew George. Even if he did, he had not yet called anyone to come out to dig the hole yet, or had told anyone a hole needed to be dug, or one had been ordered. The company he ordered it from was a couple hours away and would have no workers that knew George. The tank was not there yet, so it's not like George drove by and saw it and assumed he needed a hole dug. No one who came out and did any looking at the old septic system would have known George, and even if they did, they wouldn't have been told a new one had been ordered yet. It takes a lot of fuel to run heavy construction equipment, and George lived a little over a mile from us, so it's not like he would have driven a backhoe to the construction site for shits and giggles. The only logical explanation my father and I could figure out is since this was back around 0001, and the cordless phone would have been analog, I know it was for sure because I used to take it and walk while talking to someone to see how far I could walk before it cuts out and hears static, is somehow George picked up the phone call. It's quite possible as the site of the temporary parking of the mobile home was a half-mile closer to George, and George was a very avid ham CB guy, and he also owned a very tall and large antenna. George also refused to reveal how he knew the hole needed dug, but he was a very kind person and refused payment from my dad for digging the hole. Neighbors always helped each other without taking money. Story 25. A car did a U-turn in front of me and then disappeared. This morning, while driving through a town in the dark, I had an experience that I can't explain. I was on a two-way road with parked cars along the sides when I saw a gray Combi with LED headlights making a sharp U-turn from the opposite lane directly into mine. It was about 5 to 10 meters in front of me, so I instinctively braked to avoid it. Then, I blinked, and the car was just gone. No sign of it finishing the turn, no movement into a side street, nothing in my mirrors. It was like it never existed. What makes it even stranger is that a car was coming in the opposite lane, and they didn't react at all, as if there was never a car making a U-turn in front of me. I also had a car behind me, but it was far enough back that my brief braking didn't affect them. I wasn't tired, and I drive this route almost every day. The streetlights here are old yellow bulbs, and I checked around for reflections, but nothing explains what I saw. The two cars around me had halogen headlights, so it couldn't be them. The whole event lasted around 2 to 3 seconds, and while it felt completely real in the moment, now it feels like a dream, except I know I braked for something. I can't shake this eerie feeling. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Story 26. Bin suddenly filled itself with unknown liquid. Hi all. This is something which has been bothering me since it happened a few months back. Neither me or my parents could really come up with an explanation of how this happened. My story isn't really as interesting as others on here, but I decided to post here because I honestly cannot for the life of me figure out what happened. I have a small plastic bin in my bedroom at my parents' house. It used to be my room before I moved out, and when I stay with them for a visit I sleep in there. I use it mainly to put used tissues in or things like that. A few months back when I was staying there I went to empty the plastic bin liner and I was shocked to discover the bin was 3/4 full with a clear liquid. At first I was quite horrified and thought perhaps it was urine. It was mainly clear but had a very slight yellow tinge to it, and that someone or perhaps even our dog had somehow peed in it, but it didn't smell like urine. In fact, it didn't smell like anything at all. There was only me, my mom, dad and dog in the house. We had no visitors or anyone. We inevitably blame each other initially and insist someone must have filled it up with water as a strange prank, but everyone was insistent no one had touched it, and my mom and dad wouldn't do anything like that anyway. We couldn't really explain it. The bin wasn't near any pipes, no leaks, nothing that could have caused so much water to suddenly appear. As I said, this story isn't quite as interesting as a lot of the stories I read on here, but it made me really uneasy and we've been scratching our heads about it since. Story 27. I arrived at my lecture yesterday and no one was there, but today they're all telling me they were there. Am I crazy or is something going on? I went to my lecture at the usually scheduled time yesterday. When arrived at the building, I was really confused because usually it's incredibly packed. There is another 200-person lecture that ends 5 minutes before mine, so not only are they all coming out, but people from my lecture are waiting to go in. This time, there was no one there and the halls were empty. When I walked into the lecture hall, all of the lights were off and nobody was there except for 2 guys. They were standing in front of the chalkboard writing out problems and I asked them if lecture was happening and they said they didn't know what I was talking about and that their lecture for a different class had just finished and they were doing practice problems. I left and checked to see if I had missed an email about class being cancelled and was really confused because there weren't any. Around 5 to 10 minutes after the usual starting time for class, I emailed my professor and my ta to ask if lecture was happening and if I had missed any information. A few hours later, they replied saying that we had lecture as scheduled per usual with no location change. To make sure I wasn't going crazy, I checked to make sure I was at the right room by logging onto my university website and checking the building name and room number, which confirmed I was in the right place. Then today I went to my discussion and asked everyone if we had lecture yesterday, and they all looked at me and each other with really weird expressions and said that they had all gone to lecture. I followed that up by asking if there was a location change, and they all said no. My TAL also then told me that I was the only person to have asked about whether or not there were any changes to the lecture time and place. For context, there are over 200 people in the lecture and I was the only one to have said something. Also, during discussion today I couldn't focus at all because when my TAL was erasing the chalk on the chalkboard, instead of it looking powdery and dusting off the board, it was dripping down the chalkboard as though it were wet. I was blinking and looking around at people and no one acted as though anything was different or weird. Does anyone have any ideas as to what could have happened, or am I losing my mind? 328. The empty place. Me and my husband started noticing that wherever we decide to go, it's first empty. The moment we enter in the shops, restaurants, whatever it is, all of a sudden in a few seconds people start coming inside and the place would become crowded. We became so conscious of this that we started choosing in purpose bad, ugly-looking shops, restaurant completely empty, and we would just go inside to see the place getting full in a few minutes. Is it like if something is directing people in our direction? It's very weird. 329. Knew about the events before. Yesterday I think a glitch happened. My brother was watching an episode of a series while I was cooking. While watching the episode, I knew what was going to happen and I said to my brother, "This is the scene where she will tell to the other person about this and that." I said to him what she was going to say, and my brother asked me, "Did you watch this episode before?" And I replied to him, "We watched it a week ago. Why are you watching it again?" And he replied, "No, we didn't. I'm watching it for the first time. But in my mind I'm sure that we watched it. Did it happen to someone else also?" Story 30. Package vanished and reappeared a few days later on doorstep. I recently stumbled upon this subreddit and thought this would be a fitting experience to share here. Last fall, my mom ordered 3 rolls of string, which we use as candle wicks. We have a homemade candle business. The package arrived about a week later, and I retrieved it from the doorstep and brought it into the garage, where my mother was working on a mold. She tells me to put the box on the shelf where we store all of our candle-making supplies, so I did. Fast forward a couple days later, my mom is grabbing a fragrance dropper bottle from the shelf when she notices that the box of new string I placed isn't there. She calls me to the garage and asks if I moved the box of string, to which I respond, "I didn't, why would I?" We both distinctly remembered that I had placed the box on the shelf a couple days ago, and she claimed that was the last time she saw the box. We rummaged through the garage, behind the shelf, in the desk drawers, but this box of string vanished and was nowhere to be found. We even looked in our rooms and spent some time thinking of possible places it may have went, but nothing seemed to add up, so we decided to take the hit and planned to reorder the string when our current roll started to run low. Another few days passed. After my classes that day, I came home, made myself lunch, and decided to work on my assignments for a couple hours before leaving to go see some friends. As I was leaving the house, I opened the front door and to my surprise, the same package I placed on the supply shelf a couple days ago was on our doorstep. Confused, I called my mom and told her what had just happened, and she was baffled. When she got home later that night, we looked over the order history on the computer to confirm we weren't both going crazy, and saw that there was only one string order purchased within the last 3 months, which was the package I placed on the supply shelf the day it arrived. To this day, we occasionally talk about this moment yet still have no explanation as to how this package vanished and magically reappeared at our doorstep.